Hello, welcome to Storytime with Nanny. This is day 21. We are still in Paths to Adventure, the Abeka book. We talked about the editors were Laurel Hicks, Marion Hedquist, Sheila Conrad, and Debbie Beck. The art is by Brian Jekyll, Frank Hicks, Jim Hutchison, John Ball, Joe Degani, Terry Lynn Brumall, and Omar Garcia, designed by Michelle Johnson. Now, I did want to make note that the last story we had read actually had an author's name that they didn't have it at the end of the story, so I didn't realize until after I'd already read it. And it was The Storm King, and it says that was adapted, because we talked about how it was a story from the Bible, but we've talked about someone putting it in their own words means adapted, and it was adapted. Let's see, William J. Sly. So I did want to make note of that. And let's see, we've got a poem we can start with today, To a Honeybee. I know when I was younger I thought I don't like bees because they can sting. But without bees we wouldn't have the food we have because they pollinate. So we need that pollination so we can have food. And this is by Alice Carey. Busybody, always on the wing. Wait a bit where you have lit and tell me why you sing. Up and in the air again, flap, 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 and now she stops, and now she drops into the rose's lap. Come just a minute, come from your rose so red, hum, 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 hum. That was all she said. Busybody, so free and light all day. It seems to me, for all I see, your work is only play. But while I mused, I learned the secret of her way. Do my part with cheerful heart and turn my work to play. So the bee just looks like it's buzzing around, doesn't it? But it's really hard at work. And it's saying that we can be hard at work, but we can enjoy our work and have fun while we work too. Let's see. Oh, here's a poem called My Part, and it's by Anonymous, and we talked about that. It means we don't know who wrote that. I think some works are written so long ago they just didn't write down. They didn't think to put a name on it, or it was started by word of mouth. Of course, some stories are so old and they weren't written down, and so by the time we got to write down the actual story or the poem, we still don't know who may have started that. But it's called My Part. Oh, brook and breeze and blossom and robin on the tree, you make a joy of duty, a pride of industry. Teach me to work as cheerfully with a willing hand and heart. The world is full of labor and I must do my part. That makes me think we all do have a job to do, don't we? This is a good story. And this, let me see if I can go ahead and find the author so we won't forget it this time. It's The Blacksmith's Chain, and it is adapted by Mary R. Hooker. Why, Peter, still at work on that same great chain? What a slow fellow you are. There's no need to take such pains over every link, because you know in the chain they each have a link. Hurry up, man, and get on to something else. The old blacksmith smiled at the mocking faces around the smithy door and shook his head as he carefully examined the last link in the chain. Did it ring sound? Was it absolutely flawless? That was his question. Link by link the chain grew until at last it was complete. Men came and carried away the huge chain and put it on board a ship, where it laid unnoticed and unused for many days. But one dark, wintry night a storm arose. The captain looked anxiously into the darkness and said to himself, "We are in for a gale." That's a name for a storm. And even as he watched the stormy brook upon them with all its fury, whipping up the waves and making the ship leap and quiver, on through the pitch-dark night she toiled, with 3 men at the helm to guide her. But at last their task grew hopeless, and the captain's voice was heard above the wind, commanding the men to let down the anchor. The great chain had a work to do at last. Down it sank through the boiling waves until the anchor at last touched bottom. Will it hold? The sailors wondered as they felt the ship quiver under each fresh shock of wind and waves. Will it hold? One imperfect link and the chain would snap. One little flaw and the link would surely break. The ship with her precious cargo would strike some rock in the darkness and sink. But the anchor held. The chain was like a solid band of iron. Every link was perfect, and the ship was saved. One old man's faithful work had saved many lives that stormy night. You and I, as servants of the King of Kings, are called to work faithfully at school, at play, at home, however small the task may seem. And let us remember that we can never measure the far-reaching harm of unfaithful work, nor the blessing that comes from jobs faithfully performed. Now, that story, they made fun of him at first, didn't they? Because he worked so hard on that chain, on each little link in the chain. But it isn't a good thing he did. He took his time and did a job and did it right, because it helped save all those people on that ship when the storm came. So we need to take our time and do a job the right way. This is the shepherd boy who killed a giant, and it's from 1 Samuel 17, 1 through 53, which is in the Bible. Let's see if they have that it was adapted by, yes, William J. Sly. One starry night, a shepherd boy was watching his father's sheep. The little lambs were cuddled up close to their mothers, and all was quiet and peaceful in the moonlight, when out of the woods nearby came a dark animal. It was a big brown bear that had come to steal a lamb. Nearer and nearer it came, when the shepherd boy, who loved his sheep, quickly placed a large sharp stone in his sling and slung it at the bear's forehead. With a great cry of pain, the bear rolled over and was no more. So the lambs were saved from the bear. Another time a lion sprang out from behind a rock, and seizing a little baby lamb in his mouth, started to run away with it. Instantly the shepherd boy was after him, slinging one of his sharp stones at the lion's head. Letting the baby lamb go, the lion turned, roaring, and sprang at the boy. The boy caught him by the beard, and with his shepherd's staff struck at him, until the great animal fell back, and he was no more. So the lambs loved the shepherd still more, for he had saved them from the lion too. Sometime after, this same shepherd boy went to the battlefield to take some corn and loaves of bread to his soldiers, the brothers. So his brothers were in a war, and they were soldiers in this war. While he was talking to his brothers, a great giant came out and stood upon a high cliff and cried across the valley, "I dare any man to come and fight me." This giant was 9.5 feet tall. Upon his head was a helmet of brass. His whole body was covered with armor of brass. Even on his legs were heavy plates of brass. In his hand he held a long staff with a sharp spear point at the end. By his side hung a sword, and a man went before him carrying a shield. This was the famous Philistine giant Goliath, before whom all the Hebrew soldiers trembled and ran away to their tents in fear from. The young shepherd boy was surprised that none dared to go out and fight the giant, especially when he heard that King Saul had said whoever would kill this terrible giant should receive great riches and have the king's daughter for his wife. The boy said, "I will go and fight him." Someone told the king what he said, and Saul sent for him. "Surely you are not able to go and fight the giant," said the king. "You are only a boy, and he has been a fighter from the time he was a boy." The shepherd boy bravely replied, "When I was smaller than I am now, I was watching my father's sheep, and a bear and a lion came to take a lamb out of the flock, and I smote both the lion and the bear. This giant shall be as one of them, because he has dared to challenge the armies of the living God. My God, who delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, will deliver me out of the hand of the boastful giant." The king said, "My boy, go, and may God be with you." Then he offered the shepherd boy his armor of brass and his helmet and sword. But the shepherd boy said, "Please, may I go without these? My shepherd's sling and staff with God are all I need." Then he ran to the brook and selected 5 smooth stones and put them into his shepherd's bag and went forth to meet the giant. When Goliath saw only a boy, he said, "Am I a dog that you come to me with a stick? Come to me, boy, and I will be the death of you." The brave shepherd boy did not flinch, but replied, "You come to me with a sword and spear. I come to you in the name of the God of Israel. This day God will deliver you into my hands, and I will take your life from you. Then all the earth will know that there is a God in Israel, and that God saves not with sword or spear. This battle is God's, and he will give you into our hands." The proud giant, clad in his brass armor, began walking toward the boy, who quickly put his hand into his bag, took out a stone, and slung it with all his might at the giant's forehead. Goliath fell, his face to the ground. He was no more. Quickly the boy ran to see for himself that the giant Goliath was really dead, and he saw that he was. And when the army of the giant saw that their champion Goliath was dead, they turned and ran away over the mountains with a shout of victory. Saul's soldiers ran after them and took them prisoner. So the shepherd boy, with a sling and a stone and the help of God, won a great battle that day. He became the king's son-in-law, and when Saul died, he became king, one of the greatest and best kings Israel ever had, King David. Wow. So though David was young, he did do mighty things, didn't he? And that was a big job, being responsible for the sheep, and he took good care of them and saved them. And then he knew with God's help he could also take care of the enemy that they were gathered against the Israels. Israel hadn't done anything to them. They were just coming after them. And Goliath was the big soldier in that army. So they had put their trust in Goliath, but David came and had put his trust in God, and he won the battle for all Israel. Let's see. This is a good one. This is a cute story. And let's see. The Tame Train by Katherine Gibson. And tame, you know the little kittens I had, and they were wild, and I brought them in, and I loved on them, and they became tame. That means that they're more gentle. So that's what tame means. It's like saying it's the gentle train. And a train is, they're speaking of a train like, have you seen a choo-choo train running on the tracks? The tame train. One Saturday afternoon, Tommy Merrill sat on a green bank above the railroad tracks. Beside him sat Mr. J.T. Lawson. Tommy was 8. Mr. Lawson was 69. His hair stood up stiff like a brush and was quite white. His eyes were deep blue. Tommy and Mr. Lawson looked very different, but they were best friends. They both liked trains. Right now, they were waiting for the Dixie Special to come past. After a while, they saw a flash of light. They heard the special toot twice. Then it rushed past them. Tommy looked at Mr. Lawson. "It goes so quick," he said. "You can hardly see it. I wish we had a tame train." "A tame train?" asked Mr. Lawson. "Yes, you know, a train that wasn't so wild and fast. What I would really like would be a train, a big train, but only for boys and girls." "Why, Tommy," said Mr. Lawson, "I don't know, but you have a great idea." Mr. Lawson had been an engineer for the Great Western Railroad for 30 years and more. And now he was older, and he lived by himself, and he was lonesome and often very sad. One Monday, Mr. Lawson got on the bus. He went to see the manager of the railroad yards in New Brighton. When he got back that night, Mr. Lawson's eyes were as bright as a boy's. "Well, Mr. Lawson," told Tommy, "I've got a tame engine." "An honest big engine?" asked Tommy. "Yes. They have been using it for a switch engine, which they don't need it anymore. It's pretty old and hasn't much paint left, but it will go." "Where are you going to take it?" asked Tommy. "Right here," said Mr. Lawson, "on the little branch road that goes up to the old sawmill." "Will they let you keep it there?" asked Tommy. "They had better," said Mr. Lawson. "I bought that road today." He pointed to the small railway that was almost hidden by trees and berry bushes. "My goodness," said Tommy. "And now," said Mr. Lawson, "all I have to do is get a ton of coal and a boy to be fireman. Then the engine will be ready to start. At least it will be as soon as we clean it up." "My cousin Tim could help," said Tommy. "Well, go and ask him in the morning," said Mr. Lawson. "Is everybody going to ride in the engine?" Tommy asked. "Why, no," said Mr. Lawson. "I couldn't get a regular passenger coach with seats. I got an old red freight car." "My," said Tommy, "that's better. That's better than anything." That evening Tommy asked Mr. Lawson to tell him again about the first engine he ever drove. "The first engine I ever had," said Mr. Lawson, "was number 7869. They called it Old King Coal. That was because it burned so much coal. But it was a good engine. One winter there was a bad storm in the mountains. Lots of folks on the other side were sick. None of the regular trains could get through, but Old King Coal did. It brought doctors and nurses and medicine to all those sick people." Mr. Lawson took an old yellow square of newspaper out of his pocket and showed it to Tommy. Yes, there was the picture of King Coal and the story about it too. The next day Tommy and Mr. Lawson went down to the village station early. The tame engine was to be brought up and put on the little branch railway. When Tommy saw the engine, he just stopped and looked. The engine was all rough and dented. The cow catcher was crooked. The smokestack was bent. "See," cried Mr. Lawson proudly, "she'll go." "Yes, it does go," said Tommy politely, but he felt very much like crying. "It's just an old piece of junk," he whispered to himself. That very day Mr. Lawson and Tommy's cousin Tim started peeling off the old paint. Tommy began scraping the spokes of the wheels. Tim began polishing the old brass number plate. One by one he could see the figures. He said them out loud. 7, 8, 6, 9. "What's that?" called Mr. Lawson. 7, 8, 6, 9. Tim read the numbers again. "Are you sure?" questioned old Mr. Lawson. "That's the number of Old King Coal." "You mean," said Tommy, "this engine right here is the first engine you ever drove?" "Yes, sir," answered Mr. Lawson. "This engine right here is my first engine, Old King Cole." He took the yellow square of newspaper out of his pocket. They all looked at it. It was the very same engine. When they were through with Old King Cole, the engine was smooth and polished. All the brass shone in the sunlight. The cowcatcher was straight, so was the smokestack. Mr. Lawson and Tim and Mr. Bailey, the carpenter, went to work on the old freight car. Mr. Bailey cut windows in it. Mr. Lawson helped him build lots of seats. In the back there was quite a space with no seats, and in front too. "Picnic baskets in front," said Mr. Lawson, "dogs in back." Then they began to paint the freight car. They used gallons and gallons of red and yellow paint. It was the morning of July 4th that Old King Cole took the first trip. Mr. Lawson was in the cab. So was Tim, for he was the fireman. Tommy was in the engine too. He rang the bell, clang dong, and he made the whistle go hoot toot toot. In front were 15 picnic baskets, and in the back were 6 dogs. Luckily, most of the dogs were friends. There were only 2 fights, and neither of them lasted long. The railway went through the leafy wood. Branches came so near the window that the children had to duck. When they got to the old mill, the passengers ran away the trees, laughing and shouting, but Tommy stayed right on King Cole for the return trip. It was not long before the summer people at Shadow Lake heard about the tame train. Then the people in the big town of Brighton heard about it too. Soon there were long lines of children waiting to ride behind Old King Cole. Mr. Lawson was not lonesome any more or sad. He couldn't be. He hardly had time to eat or sleep. Children traveled on the train all fall to see the bright colors and to gather nuts in the wood. And in winter the train kept right on. Mr. Lawson had the big snow plow clean the tracks clear to the mill. Little boys and girls coasted. Older ones brought their skis. They all skated on the pond and built snapping bonfires. Mr. Lawson said, "Lots of folks thought I would be poor as a beggar because I spent every cent I had on the tame train and my branch railroad. But it looks as if King Cole will earn back all it cost me and more." When summer came again, Tommy had a birthday. Mr. Lawson gave him a cap. The cap had a black band on it, and gold letters was printed, "Junior Engineer." "Junior Engineer of the Tame Train. That's what I am," said Tommy. "And that's what I'd rather be than anything else in all the wide world." So Mr. Lawson had retired from work, which means he'd gotten older. He was at home. He didn't think he really had anything much to do, but as it turned out, he came up with a really good plan, didn't he? And then it not just blessed him, it blessed all the people, and not just in that town, but in another town as well. People would come from all over and ride the train. Now this is a cute little story called "The Puppy Who Wanted a Boy." You hear about children wanting puppies. Well, this is the puppy wanting a boy. And it says it's written by Catherine Woolley. One day, Petey, who was a puppy, said to his mother, "I'd like a boy for Christmas." His mother, who was a dog, said she guessed he could have a boy if he were a very good puppy. So the day before Christmas, Petey's mother asked, "Have you been a very good puppy?" "Yes," said Petey, "I didn't fight the cat." "You didn't?" asked Petey's mother. "Well, I just frightened her a little," said Petey. "And I didn't chew any shoes?" "Not any," said his mother. "Just a teeny weeny chew," said Petey. "All right," said his mother, "I guess you've been good. Anyway, you're awfully little. I shall go out and get you a boy for Christmas." But when Petey's mother came back, she looked worried. Would you like a soft white rabbit with pink ears for Christmas?" she said. "No thanks," said Petey. "How about some fish?" "They're nice," said Petey's mother. "I don't like fish," said Petey. Petey said his mother, "There are no boys. They're terribly short of boys this year." Petey felt as if he couldn't stand it without a boy. Finally his mother said, "There must be a boy somewhere. Perhaps you could find some dog who would give his boy away." So Petey started off. It wasn't long before he saw a collie racing with a boy on a bicycle. Petey trembled with joy. "If I had a boy on a bicycle," said Petey, "I could run like everything. I'll ask the collie politely if he'll give his boy away." So Petey leaped after the bicycle. He called out to the collie, "Excuse me, do you want to give your boy away?" But the collie said no, he definitely didn't. Petey sat down. He watched the collie and the bicycle until they were out of sight. "I didn't really want a boy on a bicycle anyway," said Petey. After a while he saw a red setter playing ball with a boy. Petey was delighted. "If I had a boy to play ball with," said Petey, "I'd catch the ball smack in my mouth." But he remembered how cross the collie had been, so he sat down on the sidewalk and called out politely, "Excuse me, do you want to give your boy away?" But the setter said no, he definitely didn't. "Oh well," said Petey, trotting off, "I don't think playing ball is much." After a while he met a Scotty, walking with his boy and carrying a package in his mouth. "Now that is a good kind of boy," said Petey. "If I had a boy to take walks with and carry packages for, there might be some dog biscuits or cookies in the package." But he remembered how cross the other dogs had been, so he stayed across the street and shouted politely as he could, "Excuse me, do you want to give your boy away?" The Scotty had his mouth full of package, but he managed to say no, he definitely didn't. "I guess that wasn't the kind of boy I wanted either," said poor Petey. "But my goodness, where will I find a boy?" Well, Petey went on and on, up busy streets, down quiet lanes. He asked every dog he met politely, but not a dog would give his boy away. "My mother was right," thought Petey. "There isn't a boy to be had." Just at dark he came to a large building on the edge of town. Petey was going by very slowly because his paws hurt. Over the door he saw a sign that said, "Orphans' Home." "I know what orphans are," Petey said to himself. "They're children who have no dog to take care of them. Maybe I could find a boy here." He padded slowly up the walk, then Petey stopped. He could hear music. Through the window he could see a lighted Christmas tree. Children were singing carols. And there on the front step of the orphan's home all by himself sat a boy. He looked lonely. Petey gave a glad little cry. He landed right in that boy's lap. Snuff, snuff went Petey's little nose. Wiggle, waggle went Petey's tail. He licked the boy with his warm, wet tongue. How glad the boy was to see Petey. He put his arms around the little dog and hugged him tight. Then the front door opened. "Goodness," said the lady, "what are you doing out here? Come on in to the Christmas tree." Petey sat very still. The boy looked up. The boy said, "I've got a puppy. Can he come too?" "A puppy?" The lady came over and looked down at Petey. "Why," she said, "you're a nice dog. Yes, bring him in." A crowd of boys was playing around the Christmas tree. They all rushed at Petey. They all wanted to pet him. Petey wagged his tail. He wagged his fat little body. He frisked about and kissed every boy who came near. "Can he stay?" the boys asked. "Yes," said the lady, "he may stay." "Come on, puppy, get your supper. We'll fix you a nice warm bed," cried another boy. "We'll all play games with you." "Who would ever think," said Petey to himself, "that I'd get 50 boys for Christmas?" So Petey was a little puppy that needed a home, didn't he? He wanted a little boy. And he got 50. He got a bunch, didn't he? That's a happy ending. Well, that is all that we have time for today. But when we pick back up, we will still be in Path to Adventure. So thank you for joining in on Storytime with Nanny. And I do hope you have a great, blessed day.